Americans spend $2 billion a year on lawn chemicals. 2 billion herbicides, glyphosate, weed killers engineered to stop certain plants from ever breaking through soil again. At the same time, a crisis researchers are calling a silent pandemic keeps getting worse. Over 1 million people dying annually from infections. Antibiotics can no longer stop. Drug-resistant bacteria spreading through hospitals, through food, through communities. What almost nobody is saying out loud: the chemical you spray Saturday morning may be making that crisis worse, and the plants you're killing may have been part of the solution. These two facts have existed side by side for decades. Nobody puts them in the same sentence. They should. Nobody connects these two facts. Let's fix that. Because here is what the research actually shows, not folk wisdom, not forum posts, not anecdote. Peer-reviewed studies, published in journals indexed by the National Institutes of Health. Certain common plants, the ones most people are actively pulling from their yards, contain compounds with measurable antimicrobial activity against the most dangerous drug-resistant bacteria alive today. A 2023 review in Plants found that medicinal plants represent one of the most promising frontiers in the post-antibiotic era, not as a replacement for medicine, as something medicine abandoned and is now being forced to rediscover. The 9 plants in this video are not rare, not tropical. You don't need to order them, grow them, or search for them. With near certainty, at least 4 of them are within 30 feet of where you're sitting right now. By the time this is over, you'll never look at your lawn the same way again, and you'll understand, in very specific terms, exactly what you've been paying to destroy. Before the list, 3 things to hold onto as we go. First, pay attention to number 5, a plant so common it grows in the cracks of sidewalks, in gravel driveways, in trampled dirt between parking lots. NIH-indexed researchers didn't just find antimicrobial properties in it. They found activity against Staphylococcus aureus, one of the most dangerous drug-resistant bacteria in the world, a weed you have almost certainly stepped on today. Second, number 1 is something every culture on Earth has a name for. Traditional Chinese healers used it. Medieval European physicians documented it. Cherokee healers incorporated it into wound treatment centuries before germ theory existed. What they were describing, without the vocabulary to name it, has since been isolated in a laboratory and given a compound name. What they knew and what we forgot is not a small gap. Third, somewhere around number 3, you'll understand why the chemical most commonly used to kill these plants was directly linked, in research released just weeks ago, to making antibiotic-resistant bacteria spread faster. That is not a coincidence. That is a system producing an outcome. 9 plants, all of them already near you, all of them under threat from products sold at every garden center in the country. Let's start. Number 9, chickweed. Most people know this as the pale, matted weed that carpets garden beds every spring. Stellaria media, chickweed. It looks like something that belongs in a compost bin. European folk healers used it as a cooling poultice for skin infections. Traditional Chinese medicine recorded it back to the Tang dynasty for heat-related skin conditions. Native American healers applied it to wounds and rashes independently on a different continent with zero shared communication. 3 traditions, 1 plant, 1 application. A 2020 PMC review confirmed that chickweed extracts demonstrate measurable antibacterial activity. The flavonoids and saponins responsible aren't trace-level compounds. They're present in concentrations high enough to explain what every culture consistently observed. Here's what most people get wrong: cold, not heat. Fresh leaves crushed and applied directly or steeped in cold water for 6 hours. Boiling water destroys the chemistry before it can work. European herbalists knew this. Most people trying this today don't. Within minutes of topical application, the cooling effect Tang dynasty physicians described is noticeable. That's the saponin activity doing exactly what every culture that documented this plant said it would. Number 8. Ground ivy. You probably call it creeping Charlie. Low, purple-flowered, kidney-leaved, spreads across lawns in dense mats, resists most herbicides. Landscapers despise it, targeted, doused, and sprayed again when it returns the following spring. Anglo-Saxon herbalists listed it in medical manuscripts over 1,000 years ago, specifically for respiratory and sinus infections. Germanic healers used it independently for the same conditions. In medieval England, it was called alehoof. Brewers used it to clarify and preserve ale before hops became standard. 3 separate traditions across Northern Europe. Same plant, same biological observation. They didn't share recipes, they shared results. Ground ivy contains rosmarinic acid, the same compound found in rosemary and sage, studied for its anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties. NIH-indexed research on the Lamiaceae plant family confirms broad antibacterial activity. Every Northern European culture reaching for this plant wasn't coincidence. It was pattern recognition across centuries. Preparation matters. Fresh leaf tea, not dried. Dried ground ivy loses a measurable portion of its volatile oil content. Steep fresh leaves in water just below boiling, around 85 degrees C, for 7 minutes. Covered. The volatile oils responsible for the antimicrobial activity escape with steam if the vessel is left open. The taste is sharp, slightly minty. That sharpness is the rosmarinic acid. The Anglo-Saxon herbalists knew the preparation was active partly because they could taste it. They were detecting chemistry through flavor. They were correct. Number 7. Cleavers. This is the one that sticks to your clothes. The sprawling, Velcro-like weed that attaches to dog fur, children's socks, jacket sleeves, Gallium apiarine. Most people yank it out by the handful without a second thought. They don't know what they're holding. Dioscorides, the Greek physician whose work remained the standard medical reference for 1,500 years, recorded cleavers for skin conditions and swollen lymph nodes. Traditional Chinese medicine used a close relative for comparable applications. Across North America, multiple indigenous nations independently incorporated it into treatments for skin infections and fevers. The small hooked bristles that make it cling to fabric were the same visible signal that drew healers across every continent to notice it. A plant defended by surface chemistry tends to produce interesting chemistry elsewhere. Cleavers contain tannins, flavonoids, and iridoids, compounds with demonstrated antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory activity in published herbal research. The lymphatic application Dioscorides described has a biochemical basis modern research has begun to map. It wasn't folklore. It was observation conducted carefully over generations by people who had no alternative but to observe carefully. Cold infusion only. Around 20 grams of fresh plant steeped in cold water for 8 hours, then strained. Heat destroys the iridoid compounds. This is one of the few plants on this list where cold preparation isn't just preferable, it's necessary. Hot water gives you something that tastes like medicine and does less of what medicine should do. The taste is mild, slightly grassy, almost no bitterness. Don't mistake that mildness for weakness. It indicates a different class of compound operating by a different mechanism. Number 6. Stinging nettle. Most people know this plant before they know its name. The burning, the white welts, the involuntary retreat. Urtica dioica grows along fence lines, in disturbed soil, in the damp corners of gardens, and most people who encounter it spend the next 10 minutes searching for a dock leaf and the following Saturday reaching for the herbicide. Roman soldiers stationed in Britain rubbed the leaves on their limbs to generate warmth in the cold northern climate. Anglo-Saxon healers used it for infections and joint conditions. Traditional Ayurvedic medicine in India documented it for respiratory complaints. Roman military, Anglo-Saxon civilian, Indian Ayurvedic, 3 medical traditions from 3 separate climates and cultures, same plant, same pattern of application, no communication between them that could explain the convergence. A 2020 PMC study found that nettle extracts demonstrate measurable antibacterial activity. The compounds responsible, polyphenols and lectins, interfere directly with bacterial cell processes. The sting itself, the formic acid and histamine in the surface trichomes, is the plant's active defense mechanism. The most visible evidence that this plant is producing biologically significant chemistry. Young leaves only harvested before the plant flowers. After flowering, the compound profile shifts and the beneficial chemistry declines. The window is spring through early summer. If it's already in full flower, that batch is past its peak. Steam or blanch briefly to neutralize the sting. What neutralizes the burn does not neutralize what heals. Cooked nettle tastes earthy, mineral-dense, closer to spinach than tea. The slight iron taste is accurate. The mineral content is genuinely high. What Roman soldiers were doing instinctively in the field was simultaneously nutritional and medicinal. They didn't distinguish between the two. They didn't need to. Number 5. Broadleaf plantain. You have stepped on this plant today, possibly more than once. Plantago major, broadleaf plantain, not the fruit, a low, rosette-forming weed with wide-ribbed leaves and a dull green spike for a flower. It grows in compacted soil, cracked pavement, trodden dirt paths, specifically in the places where nothing else survives. Anglo-Saxon medical texts, among the oldest documents written in English, listed it as one of 9 sacred healing herbs. Roman medical writers recorded it for wound treatment. Indigenous healers across North America used it with such consistency that early European settlers noticed the overlap immediately and named it white man's footprint because it spread in disturbed soil wherever people walked. 3 continents, 1 plant, 1 set of applications. That name wasn't given as a compliment. It was a botanical observation about what followed disruption. 2023, a study published in PMC examined the antimicrobial properties of Plantago major extracts in detail. The compounds identified, aucubin, actioside, baecaline, showed activity against Staphylococcus aureus, including drug-resistant strains, against E. coli, against multiple fungal pathogens. The researchers described it as a promising source of bioactive compounds for addressing drug-resistant pathogens. NIH-indexed, peer-reviewed, 2023. Specific compounds, measurable outcomes. For topical use, fresh leaves, cleaned, crushed, applied directly. For internal use, tea from dried leaves at 70 degrees C, not boiling. Above 80 degrees C, the aucubin begins to degrade. The Anglo-Saxons had no thermometers. They used a visual test, small bubbles forming at the bottom of the vessel, not a rolling boil. They were describing approximately 70 degrees C without the vocabulary to say so. They had arrived at the correct temperature through observation alone. They were right. Before we continue, I want to stop. Because there's a point in conversations like this where information stops being interesting and starts being something heavier. We've reached that point. A French Jesuit missionary named Father Antoine Nicolet is traveling through what is now northern Ontario. Deep winter, weeks from the nearest settlement. A wound on his lower leg has gone septic. No surgeon, no medication, no reasonable expectation of survival if the infection reaches the bone, which it is already beginning to do. His indigenous guides didn't deliberate. They found broadleaf plantain, pressed it against the wound, changed the compress twice daily. Nicolet wrote that he had no reason to believe it would work. He described himself as skeptical, contemptuous, even. Then he wrote, "They act with the certainty of men who have done this before." Within 3 days, the smell of the wound changed, the heat decreased, the redness retreated from the edges inward. He survived. He didn't understand why. He attributed it, in the language of his time, to providence. He didn't know about aucubin. He didn't know about actioside. He only knew what his guides already knew, what their parents had taught them, what their grandparents had taught those parents, in an unbroken chain of direct observation stretching back further than any written record in any language. What Nicolet described in 1847, NIH researchers confirmed in 2023, not approximately, not suggestively, with compound identification, mechanism mapping, and measured activity against the specific pathogens that would have killed him. The knowledge didn't disappear between 1847 and 2023. It was practiced continuously in indigenous communities, in rural traditions, in the margins of agricultural life, by people who were never asked to publish it, never given a laboratory, and never needed one. They had something the laboratory eventually caught up with. What was lost wasn't the knowledge. What was lost was the transmission. The moment when a grandparent walking a dirt path would stop, point down, and say, "Remember this one." We replaced that moment with a spray bottle and a Saturday morning. The next 4 plants are where the science becomes most urgent. Because the compounds researchers are studying, in the context of a crisis killing more than 1 million people a year, aren't in distant rainforests or protected reserves. They're in the unmowed corner of your yard, the fence line nobody tends, the crack in the driveway you keep meaning to address. Let's continue. Number 4. Yarrow. Yarrow grows in meadows, unmowed lawn edges, roadsides, disturbed ground, flat-topped clusters of white or pale yellow flowers, feathery aromatic leaves. Most homeowners cut it down with the grass without noticing it. It gets no name. It simply gets removed. The genus name tells you everything. Achillea, named for Achilles, who, according to Homer, used it to treat the battlefield wounds of his soldiers at Troy. Greek military physicians documented it specifically for wound treatment, and the name persisted for a reason. Indigenous North American nations used it for wound healing and fever, documented entirely separately. Chinese medical texts from the Han Dynasty recorded the same applications. Military medicine, civilian herbalism, Eastern medical tradition, 3 systems, 1 plant, 1 consistent use case. Yarrow contains achillene, a compound with documented hemostatic properties, meaning it actively assists blood clotting at wound sites. It also contains flavonoids and terpenes with confirmed antimicrobial activity in NIH-indexed research. The wound application Homer described, the Han Dynasty recorded, and indigenous healers practiced independently. It has biochemical support. It wasn't invented. It was discovered, repeatedly, by people paying close enough attention to what worked. For topical wound application, fresh crushed leaves applied directly. The hemostatic compounds are most active in fresh material. For fever or internal infection, dried flower and leaf tea steeped at 80 degrees C for 10 minutes. The flowers carry higher flavonoid concentrations than the leaves. If you're drying yarrow, dry the whole flowering tops. The stems alone are not what you want. Crush yarrow leaves in your hand. The smell is sharp, almost camphor-like, distinctly medicinal. Field medics across multiple historical periods described that smell as confirmation the preparation was potent. They were detecting active chemistry through their own senses. They were not wrong. Number 3. Purslane. Low, fleshy, succulent-looking, thick reddish stems, small rounded leaves, a waxy texture that makes it look like it belongs in a greenhouse. Gardeners despise it because it pulls out cleanly and reappears in 3 days. It is one of the most globally widespread plants on Earth. It is also one of the most globally underestimated. Ancient Egyptian medical records, Ayurvedic texts, the writings of Dioscorides and Pliny, traditional Chinese medicine with continuous recorded use spanning more than 2,000 years. Gandhi reportedly ate it daily as a deliberate health practice. This is not a plant one culture stumbled onto. This is a plant every agricultural civilization on Earth independently identified as significant. Then the modern lawn care industry identified it as a target. Purslane contains the highest omega-3 fatty acid content of any leafy plant yet analyzed. It also contains quercetin and kaempferol, flavonoids, with confirmed antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties in multiple NIH-indexed studies. Purslane extracts have shown activity against E. coli, Staphylococcus aureus, and several fungal pathogens. It is also one of the primary species listed on glyphosate product labels for elimination. Here is what 2026 research changed. A study covered by both SciTech Daily and Beyond Pesticides found that glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, the most widely used herbicide on Earth, doesn't only kill plants. It promotes adaptive resistance in bacteria. It changes bacterial behavior in ways that make them harder to treat with antibiotics, even antibiotics they were previously susceptible to. Glyphosate applied to soil to kill plants like purslane alters the microbial environment in a direction that favors resistance. You spray the plant, the bacteria in the surrounding environment become more dangerous. The product sold to eliminate what may have been part of the solution may be accelerating the problem the solution was needed for. Eat it raw, add it directly to salads, flavonoids at full concentration, no preparation required. For something more concentrated, light steaming immediately before consumption. Don't overcook it. The omega-3 content degrades rapidly above 100 degrees C. The raw plant is mild, slightly lemony, a faint natural saltiness. It doesn't taste like medicine. Every civilization that found it ate it as food. It is food, with medicinal chemistry built in, whether you recognize it or not. Number 2, Tormentil. Most people have never heard of this one. A small four-petaled yellow wildflower grows in acidic grasslands, moorlands, disturbed meadow edges. If you've passed it, you assumed it was a buttercup and kept walking. It doesn't get targeted. It doesn't get named. It simply gets mowed. Medieval European herbalists considered it one of their most reliable plants for intestinal infections and wound contamination. It appears in Benedictine records, in Cistercian herbals, in Irish folk medicine documented independently, geographically separated communities within the same continent, using the same plant for the same conditions, without shared texts or communication. Not one tradition, several, arriving at the same conclusion through separate observation. Then the laboratory caught up. A study highlighted by Science Alert and Earthcom found that Tormentil contains L-argitinins, specifically agramoniin and pedunculogin, that demonstrated activity against drug-resistant bacteria, including MRSA. Researchers called it a forgotten medicinal plant, showing significant promise against dangerous superbugs. The mechanism matters. The L-argitinins don't target a single biological process. They attack bacterial membrane integrity structurally. Drug-resistant bacteria develop resistance by adapting to single-target attacks. A structural disruption is harder to adapt around. It is exactly the kind of mechanism researchers working on the post-antibiotic crisis are specifically looking for. And it has been growing unnoticed in every meadow edge and unmowed field margin in the temperate world. The active compounds are concentrated in the root, not the flower, not the leaves. Root decoction, chopped roots simmered at a low rolling boil for 20 minutes. The L-argitinins require extended heat to release fully. This is the opposite of most plants on this list. With Tormentil, heat and time are both required. A steep will not do it. The decoction is strongly astringent. A noticeable tightening in the mouth, the throat, the lips. Medieval herbalists used that sensation as direct quality control when the tightening was present. The medicine was active. When it was absent, the preparation had failed. They were using their own senses to verify the chemistry. They were correct. We are almost there. But before number 1, notice something. Every plant on this list shares one thing beyond chemistry. Every single one is listed by name on herbicide product labels, not as a warning, as a target. Achillea millefolium yarrow, listed. Portulaca oleracea purslane, listed. Potentilla erecta Tormentil, listed. The 2026 research didn't just find that glyphosate kills plants. It found that the mechanism is adaptive. Bacteria exposed to glyphosate don't just survive, they change. They become better at surviving the next chemical they encounter, including the antibiotics doctors prescribe when your infection stops responding to the first one. The herbicide industry and the antibiotic resistance crisis are not running on parallel tracks. According to this research, one is actively accelerating the other. You are not being told this at the garden center. It is not printed on the bag. Every plant we've covered has a documented history, a named compound, a peer-reviewed finding, a preparation method that works, each one growing within reach of most people watching this right now. But number one is different, not because the science is stronger, though it is, not because the history is longer, though it is. It's different because of the scale of the effort to eliminate it, because of what that effort tells you about the system that organized it. $500 million every year, one plant. You already know what it is. Number one, dandelions. No plant on this list is more hated, more systematically targeted, more aggressively destroyed. Taraxacum officinale, the dandelion. Americans alone spend more than $500 million every year removing it from lawns. Entire product lines exist for the sole purpose of eliminating it. It is the plant neighbors judge each other for tolerating. The one homeowners associations send letters about. The universal symbol of a lawn that has been neglected. It is also the most studied plant on this entire list. Arab physicians documented its medical applications in the 10th century. Persian medical texts from the same era describe it with precision for liver and digestive conditions. Traditional Chinese medicine has used it continuously for over 1,000 years. Cherokee healers used it for kidney function and fatigue. Medieval European herbalists prescribed it widely for conditions we now treat with pharmaceuticals. There is no continent with a temperate climate where human beings encountered the dandelion and did not immediately recognize it as medically significant. Every civilization that found it used it. Every lawn in the modern world tries to eliminate it. The dandelion contains taraxacin, taraxacerin, luteolin, and inulin, compounds studied for anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and prebiotic properties across multiple peer-reviewed platforms. More calcium per gram than milk, more iron per gram than spinach. Every part of the plant is medicinally active. The root carries the highest concentration of active compounds. The flower is rich in antioxidants. The leaf is nutritionally dense in ways that would cost you money to replicate in supplement form. Each part requires a different preparation. They are not interchangeable. Root tincture delivers the highest compound concentration, chopped root steeped in 40% alcohol for 4 to 6 weeks. Without alcohol, root decoction, chopped root simmered for 20 minutes, strained, consumed warm. For the leaf, raw in salad or as a mild tea. The flower tea is the gentlest preparation. The root decoction is the most potent. The root decoction is significantly, unmistakably bitter. That bitterness is the taraxacin. Traditional Chinese physicians specifically documented it as confirmation of potency. When the bitterness was present, the medicine was correctly prepared. When it was absent, something had gone wrong. The bitterness is not a side effect, it is the signal. The most destroyed plant in this video, the most documented in global medical history, the most confirmed by ancient traditions spanning every civilization that ever encountered it, the most actively targeted by a $500 million industry every year. Sitting in your yard right now, waiting for Saturday. You came into this thinking about weeds. You're leaving knowing something different. 9 plants, all of them already near you, all of them documented by ancient medical traditions spanning every continent where temperate plants grow. All of them confirmed in peer-reviewed, NIH-indexed research to contain compounds with measurable activity against the bacteria that modern medicine is running out of answers for. All of them currently listed as targets on products sold at every garden center in the country. The information in this video was never hidden, never classified, never suppressed. It exists in NIH-indexed journals, in university research databases, technically public, practically invisible to anyone who wasn't already looking. The problem was never access. The problem was that no one placed it in front of the people who needed it in a form they could use at a moment when it mattered. That is what just changed. Your yard, however overgrown, however imperfect, however much your neighbors have opinions about it, is already a pharmacy. It always was. It just needed someone to read you the label. There is someone in your life who will spend this Saturday the same way they've spent every Saturday before it. Spray bottle in hand, killing dandelions, pulling plantain from the driveway crack, ripping cleavers from the fence line, not out of malice, because no one told them what they were holding. You know now. Passing that on is not a small thing. It is exactly the kind of transmission that got interrupted somewhere between the generation that knew these plants by name and the generation that learned to destroy them by habit. Share this with the person who needs it, not because an algorithm asked you to, because someone once stopped on a dirt path, pointed down and said, "Remember this one." Now you can be that person. If you're not subscribed to the old remedy yet, this is your invitation. Hit subscribe, ring the bell. Because what we're building here isn't content you scroll past. It's knowledge worth keeping. The old ways are still here, and so are we. See you in the next one.